Hey, this is Colter Wall, and you're listening to Walking the Floor.
I'm walking the floor over you.
Walking the floor.
I'm walking the floor. Walking the floor over you.
Hola, senors and senoritas. This is Chris Shiplet, and you are listening to Walking the Floor. Can you feel it out there? Life has returned to normal. We're back on track after our wild week of postponed shows and whatnots. We were in New Orleans over the weekend. That was great. Came home, got to play with Alice Cooper on Halloween. I'm sure you saw that with Dave with this crazy David Letterman outfit. That whole day was just bananas, full dream come true, crazy rock and roll kind of moment. And now I'm sitting here at my desk with my with boxes and boxes of CDs that I collected back in the 90s and early 2000s that have been sitting in my garage for years collecting dust, and I'm trying to go through them and get rid of all of them. Is there anybody out there that wants to relieve me of thousands and thousands of CDs? I don't need them anymore because, you know, we got streaming. I got Spotify. I got iTunes. I got all that stuff. I don't need all this clutter. I'm trying to unclutter my life as quick as possible because I got to get back out on the road next week. Get back to it. And my wife's been purging everything in my house, and so I come home from tour. I got this gigantic honey-do list, and I'm just, you know, I'm trying to be a good citizen of my household here and get through it, but it's not easy, and then you get sidetracked, and you're like, whoa, I haven't seen this NoFX CD in so long, it's crazy, and then you start listening to that, and then you go down the rabbit hole. Next thing you know, you're watching YouTube videos of RKL. I'm just saying, that's what's happening in my house right now, and I'm just trying to get through it all so I can, you know, I don't know, so I can get to the next thing on my list. That's what I'm doing. We got some good news this week. You may remember Tucker Bethard, who I interviewed a while back on this show. He's got an album release date, so that's coming soon. Album release coming from Tucker Bethard, I think in the middle of November, middle of this month. Got some sad news, too, from another former interviewee on this show. You may remember Joe Saunders, who was the grandson of Bakersfield legend Billy Mize. He emailed me this week and to tell me that Billy Mize passed away, and they're having a funeral up in Bakersfield for him on November 7th. So, yeah, that's sad. Yeah, you'll never see another guy like that again. Billy Mize, legend. If you're not familiar with Billy Mize, go back and listen to the interview that I did with Joe, who made a documentary about him. Very cool. Amazing legend of the Bakersfield sound. Let's get on over to Zounds.com, your home online for any of your music gear needs. Let's talk about their customer service. Did you know that every person you talk to at Zounds is a real musician, not a salesperson? They don't work on commission. So get on over to Zounds.com because they got absolutely free shipping on every order, no minimum purchase required, no exclusions, man. Zounds.com. All right, let's get on over to the interview. All right, Colter Wall, to my mind, doesn't really sound like anybody else out there in the world of Americana or roots music. He has a very distinctive voice, a very distinctive kind of dynamic to the music that he makes that I think is pretty heavily informed by his upbringing in the prairie lands of Canada. He makes kind of sparse, lonely sounding music with a certain weight to it. There's like a heaviness to it, and there's a heaviness to his voice. But there wasn't really a heaviness to him as a person when he came by the Walking the Floor World Headquarters to have a little chat about his debut record and working with Dave Cobb and his plans for his next record, which I think he's actually going to make pretty soon. We had a great little visit, and this is Colter Wall on Walking the Floor.
Didn't catch the reference, I could tell.
Anyway, if you're good, we can just jump right into it.
Fire away, man. I'm ready when you are.
I interviewed Steve Earle recently, and he said something that I thought was kind of funny, actually. He said that he thought your voice was like a put-on until he met you.
And I'm wondering if you get that a lot. Like, do people expect you to walk in the door and be like 60 years old, and then you walk in and you're this 22-year-old dude, and they're like, "Hey, what?"
It's a frequent thing. I get it. Not all the time, but a lot. You know,
Right.
Where people are kind of. One thing people always say is, "Well, I didn't expect that." You know, I didn't expect you to sound like that, and. You know, I never really knew how to respond to that ever. Now I've just started to ask them, well, what were you expecting? You know, just to see what they say. But it is something that comes up a lot at shows and meeting people. You know, I guess, I don't know. I guess they I mean, I understand. I get it, you know.
Yeah.
But,
I'm guessing that happens to you less now that you're becoming a more well-known, singer.
I guess so, man. I usually make some joke about smoking too many cigarettes or something like that, and then just sort of move on to the next topic.
Right.
But yeah, it is certainly a frequent occurrence and has been for as long as I've been doing this. You know, but I get it. You know, I understand why people might have that kind of reaction.
Sure.
Like, you know, almost sort of thing.
I mean, your voice does have like an almost like a, I don't know what you would call it exactly. It's like it's got like an otherworldly kind of quality to it, you know?
Well, I appreciate that, man. I mean, singing is a thing that, you know, I still don't really consider myself much of a singer. I mean, it's something that I'm still figuring out how to do and have been figuring it out since I started. I cut an EP just about 3 years ago now, and I can listen to those recordings and then listen to the record I cut last year, and to me it doesn't even sound like the same person. And then in the same sort of the same sense, you know, if we get like a live recording from a show that we've done this year, and I listen to that, and I listen to the record I did last year,
right?
You know, it's something that I'm always trying to get better at because I never felt like I'm very good at it.
Right. It's evolving.
So yeah, it's something that I'm. If it's not, you know, I'd like to think that it is, and that I'm trying to do that. But it's kind of a weird thing to be known as a singer, or for people to, you know you because of the voice you have or whatever. And it's never really something that I expected to happen, I guess. But I don't know. I'll take it, I guess. You know? Whatever piques people's interest and perks their ears up, I guess.
Well, Steve Earle also, in that interview, said that you are the best young songwriter that he's come across in a long time. And I know you've gotten, you know, similar accolades from people like Rick Rubin and whoever else. And I'm wondering how that, you know, does that create an unwelcome pressure for you, for something to live up to? Or are you like, yeah, that's cool?
I try to take that route. You know? That's certainly the path that I'd try to take over the you know, crazy amount of pressure that, you know, a guy like Steve Earle I've been listening to for years.
Sure.
And, you know, really studiously listened to his records and his songs and stolen a lot from him, you know, as a songwriter.
Haven't we all?
Yeah. So to hear him say something like that, it's I remember first show I did with him, I'd met him at a gig in Nashville, but the first show that I opened up for Steve was he was doing a residency at the City Winery in Chicago and also Nashville, but we started off in Chicago, and he did an introduction. You know, Steve's a talker.
That's an understatement.
He went up and did a very long, very generous introduction, and then he said that what you had just said about, you know, being being best songwriter in however many years, or young songwriter or whatever it was, and I can remember, I don't think I'll ever forget, you know, standing behind the curtains and hearing that, and kind of just, you know, I didn't know how to react to something like that. It was a mix of pressure and pride, I guess, that I felt, you know. And I don't really remember anything else about that show, but I remember that. So I guess it's probably a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Is my roundabout way of answering that question.
Well, it seems like that sort of stuff can be great for a young artist to help get established or whatever. But there's certainly a long list of people that have sort of buckled from that kind of those kind of expectations.
Yeah, and that that's something that I've thought a lot about, and it'd be an understatement to say it keeps me up some nights, things like that. But I don't know. I guess the best way to take it would be just to humbly accept that kind of accolade and try to live up to it, and try to keep telling good stories that people are able to enjoy and appreciate on a level of creativity, and appreciate on a level of someone who's also a songwriter like Steve or whoever it happens to be can hopefully appreciate if they dig it or if they don't or whatever. But that's all I'm trying to do, man. I just try to keep telling good stories.
I mean, how much has your life changed since your record came out? Like as far as drawing crowds and being able to get out on the road more and all that sort of thing. Like I'm wondering like what the comparison would be to like you doing gigs last year versus you doing gigs this year.
It's been a pretty notable difference. I have the kind of weird situation of being pretty new to this whole playing music for a living thing. I've only been doing it for full time. I've only been doing it for maybe 2.5, 3 years, and
for people listening, you're 22, right?
Yeah.
Right. So you're obviously very young.
But I started up pretty young, and it was something that I would do as well as had other jobs to keep myself afloat, I guess. And then I do music on the side and try to do a tour back home in Canada where I'm from every now and then. But whenever I first came down to start playing shows in the States is kind of when it felt like maybe I could try to make it a full-time gig, which had always been the mission statement,
Sure.
It was always like, don't really give a damn about whether or not I can rake in tons of money, but if I can have enough to do it full-time and not have to have a second job, then that was sort of what I was shooting for. And eventually we got to that point.
Did you get to that point before your record came out?
Yes, but not by a lot,
Right.
I'd been playing shows as my full-time gig before the record came out, and that helped me to sort of, I guess, develop a little bit of a small audience and small following before I actually put out my first LP. But really, I hadn't been at it very long. So it's been it's a weird trajectory of what the shows have been like. But following the release of the record this year, it's been the fastest I've noticed it sort of progress with as far as head count in rooms and
have you been doing
sales and stuff.
Like, have you been doing a mix of going out and supporting other bigger artists and then also going out and do your own shows?
I've been opening up for bands for as long as I've been doing this. This is our first headlining tour, actually.
Oh, really?
We're doing right now.
So who have you been out on the road with?
Most recently, we've been out with some really, really great singer-songwriters and great people. Margot Price, we did last spring, which was a good long tour and a lot of fun. We played a lot of gigs and a lot of tours with a guy named Cody Jinks, who's also become a good friend of mine. And
oh, sure.
Ward Davis. Who else? Whitey Morgan. A couple shows with Paul Cawthon, who's become a friend, and plenty other folks I can't remember. But to name some of the people that have sort of had a big impact on me, just as people that I've gotten to know, and then doing shows with Steve and stuff like that too. But yeah, I've been an opening act for pretty much as long as I've been out here doing this. So to be able to go out and be the headliner is like kind of an adjustment for me. I'm still figuring out how to do that and how to just perform.
You've been watching old David Lee Roth videos
to
work on your between song banter.
Yeah. Old Dave Cobb. We've been listening to his isolated vocals in the van a lot.
Oh, it's the best, man.
God, that's great.
Heaven. Hey, I know your record's pretty sparse, but there is other instrumentation, some drums and whatnot, and steel. And when you go out, do you go out with a band?
That's another kind of new thing. A few months ago, right around South by Southwest, I took a band out for the first time, and we had maybe had like a month of rehearsal. So, and I've been playing with them on and off ever since. I love playing solo, and I think it's a pretty important part of what I do is that I have to be able to do it by myself sometimes, being that, I call myself a folk singer, and I sing a lot of folk songs, and I think the best way to perform a lot of those and to present a lot of those stories and those songs is kind of just as a one guy with
there is a freedom in that. Like, you don't have to worry about anybody else's schedule, and you don't have to worry about other people catching the cues live or starting this. So you can just kind of go at your own thing. Like, how's that adjustment been working with other
it's
musicians?
Been different. I've kind of come from the school of, if you listen to whether it's a live recording or whether it's one of his records, if you listen to a guy like Raymond Jack Elliott, for example, Jack changes when he wants to change when he's playing songs.
Right.
And I kind of come from that same place, or at least I did. And I still do that when I play solo now. I kind of just, I think that's part of the beauty of that kind of music. It's kind of like chaotic in a way. And that, plays to its own strengths, I guess. But, playing with other people has been a bit of a challenge in the sense of having to be a little more organized with that sort of thing, and musically it's been a learning curve for me, because I'm certainly not the world's strongest guitar player or vocalist by any stretch of the imagination, so it's been a challenge, but I like that. I kind of dig that whole element of it.
I always marvel at anybody that can play fingerstyle guitar and sing at the same time. That is like a very admirable thing to be able to pull off.
Once you get it, you'll never forget it. It's just one of those. It's a muscle memory thing.
Right.
At least that's how I see it. But yeah, I don't know. I've been figuring out how to integrate what I do into a band setting, and that's been a lot of fun toying around with. It's a small, it's me and three other folks playing.
You got a steel guy out there with you?
I got a guy that plays dobro, no pedal steel yet. I got a fiddle player who will play a mandolin from time to time, and a bass player and a drummer who's kind of a jack of all trades, and he'll come off the drums and we'll do kind of a string band thing. He'll pick up the dobro and play that. But I'm not ruling out pedal steel for the future, because why would you ever do that?
Right. Well, the hard part about touring with somebody on steel is that, there's different angles to this. The good ones are really expensive. Mm-hmm. Pretty much across the board, they're all crazy.
Yeah.
And a bad pedal steel player will fucking sink your ship, man.
Yeah, yeah, I believe it. I think probably maybe at some point next year, or within the next couple of years, I might throw in somebody to mess around on pedal steel. But I've always felt like dobro in itself within folk music and country music is one of my favorite instruments, and really kind of underrated. I think kind of overshadowed by the pedal steel a lot of the time.
Sure.
So I've been enjoying having that in the live set. There's a lot of dobro on the record. There's pedal steel on the record too, but there's quite a bit of dobro playing, and there will be on the next one too. It's just it's one of those things, man. I can't get enough of it. I love the sound of it.
Let's talk about where you're from. So you grew up in Saskatchewan, right?
Yep.
What was that like growing up? I don't know Saskatchewan well, although I have toured there.
Right.
Here and there. I've never spent much time there.
That's okay. I think a lot of people in the States aren't too familiar with it, and couldn't really point it out on a map if you asked them.
Well, I did one tour a long time ago. I mean, I've toured Canada a million times, but I did one really extensive tour of Canada in like the winter of '96 in a RV. And we toured from like Quebec City to Vancouver and hit like
Went
every
across the
Thunder
middle.
Bay and Saskatoon. We hit everywhere, you know what I mean? But that was like the one time I did that, and that was a long time ago. But that's for me when I think of Canada. That is always the experiences I had on that tour are always the ones that pop right into my head.
Well, that's really good to hear, man, because in my experience being down here and talking with people and you know, whenever somebody finds out I'm from Canada, they always start asking like, oh man, you know, we were up in, people have usually been to maybe Ontario, you know, like Toronto or Ottawa or something like that, or they've on the other side, they've been on the West Coast over in Vancouver, and the middle part, which is where I'm from, is often you know, overlooked or missed by whether it's tourists or touring musicians too.
Right. Am I off base here in thinking that culturally it's pretty similar to like that same area in the States?
It is, yeah, it is. Not entirely similar, obviously, but very much so.
Right.
You know, it's there's 3 provinces in the middle of Canada. The easternmost one is Manitoba, and then the one in the middle is Saskatchewan, where I'm from, and then the one west of there is Alberta.
Right.
And those are kind of what they call the prairie provinces, because they're you know, comprised mostly of just sort of plains and flatlands. And
right.
There's forested areas too in different parts, and obviously Alberta's got the Rocky Mountains if you go far enough west and all that. But you know, a good portion of that landscape is pretty flat and pretty empty, it seems. I know for a lot of my buddies south of the border, everybody in the band's American, and everybody on my team for the most part's based in the States. So it was really fun taking them up there and you know, getting to experience that level of just really sparsely populated area, you know,
right.
and really wide open spaces. And
I mean, do you think that that's an influence on your music? Your music has a lot of space in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it took me a while to sort of put 2 and 2 together and realize that that's probably has a lot to do with why I like the kind of music I like and why I try to make the kind of music that I make. But I think it certainly has had a big effect on what I do and what's pleasing to my ear, I guess. But yeah, it's an interesting part of the world that a lot of people don't really know about. Very rural areas. There's cities too, but you know, it's mostly made up of small towns. And a lot of farmers, a lot of ranchers, guys working oil rigs and stuff like that. But it's you know, they have their own culture there, and it's very much like we were saying, similar to sort of Northwestern, Midwestern culture, where it's a lot of you know, I grew up around rodeo culture and a lot of farms and that sort of thing. So that, you know, people always ask, "You're from Canada, what, you know, how come you're playing country songs? You're from Canada, how can that be?" And they don't.
Right.
I think a lot of people don't realize that. You know, I come from a pretty rural area and in a place where, you know, people are real westernized and they love country music because that's the kind of lives they lead.
Sure.
They lead.
Is there a native scene for that up there? Like, are there country bands up from that part of Canada that I should know that I don't?
Well, there are a lot of country acts. Some of them really great, some of them really not so great. You know, but you know, I guess you could say that about anywhere. I think one of the things about that area is that it's really hard as a musician to make a living playing music up there, just in the sense of playing live shows. You almost have to find some other market, I think.
It's hard to tour up there. I mean, it's so spread out.
Yeah,
you know?
that's the thing, is you spend an incredible amount of money in gas just trying to get from one place to the next, and it's not a very big market just because there's a very small amount of people that live out there, you know?
Right.
So it's tough, and I think as a result that sort of, you'd think that would greatly hinder the music community up there, and that there would almost be none. But that's certainly not true, because there's a lot of really great songwriters and musicians that are up there. this guy named William Prince, who I recently met he's from Winnipeg, which is east of where I'm from over in Manitoba, but he's a great songwriter, great voice, big Indian guy. He's got a great, deep, kind of gravelly voice and really heartfelt songs. And there's a guy that I've known for a long time. I actually just saw him. The other night, I had one day off and we were in Nashville, and I went to the Legion because my buddy Blake Berglund, who is ex-rodeo rancher fella from Saskatchewan, turned songwriter. Him and his sweetheart, who's a girl named Mel, she goes by Belle Plain, who sings on my EP. We did a song called Caroline together. They tour around together and play shows. And
I think I just got pitched to interview him, actually.
He's real fucking smart guy, man, and he writes. His new record is called Realms, and he writes really intelligent.
Is it a little bit
songs.
Psychedelic?
Yeah, it's kind of space cowboy record.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
it's
I
good,
just
man.
was listening to that.
But he's great. There's a duo from southwestern Saskatchewan, which is kind of my neck of the woods, called Casey and Clayton, that I think the world of. I think they're with New West Records now,
Right.
But they're badass, man. They're pretty true blue folk singing duo. Clayton's probably the best Travis picker I've ever seen.
Oh, really?
Man, he's like Mississippi John Hurt, that thing. It's awesome to watch him.
When I think of Canada, I always associate Canada with punk rock, because when I was touring up there a lot was when I used to be in a band called No Use for a Name, and it was on a label called Fat Records, and there was a band called Propaganda that was from I don't remember where they were from, Winnipeg or Edmonton or somewhere. And then one of the guys went off and formed another band that was, God, what the fuck were they called? That was on Epitaph. Whatever, I'm senile, I can't remember. But I sort of always have an association with that from that part of Canada. Right. I don't know if you ever were involved in that world.
I'm aware of it, and I have been aware of it, and that sort of thing certainly has an audience there. People are into it.
Well, there was a very strange thing, like in the 90s, say in the mid-90s, when I was around that world a lot. For some reason, the French part of Canada, in Quebec, that like 90s California punk rock was 10 times bigger there than everywhere else. It was just this weird, I don't know why, I can't explain it. You would play like Boston to like 70 people, and then you go up to Montreal and play like, the Spectrum. It's sold out. Right. It was just, go figure.
That's something else. I've only really been in Quebec a handful of times, so I'm not, not too familiar with the music scene around that area, but I know that there are a lot just from being there. I think I played Montreal maybe twice, and you can tell that there is a flourishing music scene up there.
Yeah.
And that people are really into the arts in that sort of area, and I dig that.
So, back to like you growing up, I'm wondering what your, what was your family like? What was family life like for you? I know I read that your dad was a politician, which I thought was kind of funny because there's a lyric on your album that says, "Don't trust no politicians." Yeah. So I was wondering how your dad felt when he listened to that. Like, hey, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, we had an interesting conversation over the supper table whenever he first heard that song. But yeah.
We're like, I just needed a rhyme, Dad, I swear.
Come on, man. No, life as a kid was a little weird just because of my old man and his job that he had, and I love my dad to death, and a lot of people back home do not.
Well, I must admit I'm fairly ignorant about Canadian politics. What is your version of Republicans and Democrats?
Well, we have kind of it's sort of more like three major parties rather than two, and there's more than three parties, but there's three ones that are kind of the powerhouses, and they're the conservatives, which would be the closest thing we have to Republicans, and the liberals and the NDPs, who are more left to center. Those are the three.
Which one was your dad?
He's a conservative, and I've gone on record as saying before that growing up I'd never like to talk about politics just because because of my situation and because it was always something that was a part of my life, and I just kind of tried to avoid it. But as I get older, I've been learning that you have to you have to have certain things you believe in, and sometimes those things are political, and as I've come to kind of get to know myself better, I've realized I don't agree with a lot of the same things that
Sure.
my old man might agree with on the political spectrum of things. And at the same time, there are other things I do agree with him, But growing up was sort of strange because of that, and I was lucky in the sense that I grew up in a pretty small town. Not like tiny, but a relatively small town, and out in that place in the world where there's not a lot of people out there.
Was your family musical?
Yeah, my mom's side is pretty musical. She plays piano quite well, and I played piano as a kid. I went through lessons and all that. And
When did you start playing? Was that your first thing, piano?
that was my first thing, and I quit at one point, and then later on picked up a guitar and decided that I was going to try to learn how to do that, and that's sort of when everything shifted, and I figured out I wasn't really any good at sports or much of anything else, but I could play the guitar a little bit, and I really enjoyed that. And that was probably around 12 or 13 years old.
Did you have early attempts at bands?
I kind of a little bit.
I'm always curious with people that are, solo performers,
Right.
How they arrived there. Was it like terrible experiences in bands that led them there, or was it no experiences in bands?
I had a group of dudes that I'd play around with in high school, and we kind of would every now and then play a show. There's a great, it used to be an old theater. It's like over 100 years old. It's in my hometown. It's called the Lyric Theater. It's a big brick building, and they do an open stage there, and they always had for as long as I can remember. So we would go there, every month, play there once a month, and but that was just
Like
with
what kind
high
of
school
music?
Kids.
What
We
were you
just
listening to at that point?
Covering whatever we could. I was listening to, when I first picked up a guitar, I was listening to mostly like hard rock stuff. I listened to a lot of Zeppelin, which I could still appreciate now, and a lot of Zeppelin and AC/DC and stuff like that. And then, I started playing with people, and I had kind of fallen into that whole world of, you listen to a lot of rock and roll, and then I started to discover old blues guys. And I got into that when I was, in high school, and I would try to play those songs with other guys who didn't want anything to do with it. So we'd kind of just end up playing, we'd maybe go around and just whoever wanted to play a song they knew, we'd all try to play it. But just a bunch of high school kids messing around that didn't really know how to play their instruments. That was my only band experience before what I'm doing now. And then, at one point, a few years later, I figured out, picked up an acoustic guitar and started playing that more, and figured that, I'm not really a great guitar player. Maybe I ought to try the songwriting thing, because by then I'd started listening to Dylan. That was sort of the door that opened to that whole world of things, and storytelling and songwriting and folk music and that sort of stuff. And that's sort of when I kind of, buried myself in that world of things.
So when did you make your EP in all of this? And how did that, who put it out? Who produced it? Where'd you make it?
I put it out myself, but I went. I was living in Saskatoon at the time because I was going through my first year of university up there, and this was before. I was up there for a couple of years, and I promptly dropped out because I couldn't stand it, and it was driving me crazy. And by then, I was writing songs that I thought were good enough to keep. So I figured, man, fuck this. I'm just gonna go try to write songs, and I'll get a job, if I need to. But anyhow, I was living in Saskatoon, and was it first year or second year? I can't remember, one of the two. And there was a guy I'd opened up a show. It's like this Christmas event kind of thing in Regina, which is the capital of Saskatchewan. just 2 hours outside of Saskatoon, pretty much.
Been there in '96.
There you go. Old Regina.
Referencing that last tour.
So I went to play this gig, and this guy who owned a studio in Regina, who I'd never met before, a guy named Jason Plum, came out to just a sound check. He just listened to me do a sound check, and I played a few songs for him. And he said, "Hey man, come, why don't you come hang out and see the studio? And I'm not trying to pressure you into anything, but if you ever thought about cutting a record, come give it a look."
Yeah.
I'd never been in the damn studio before. I didn't know what to expect. And turned out it used to belong to the CBC, and they had, I guess they just weren't using it because it's a studio. It's in the basement of their broadcasting center in Regina. Right. And they have this beautiful studio that they weren't using, and they ended up having to sell it to this guy Jason, who had been a touring musician and had quite a bit of success writing songs and going out and playing with live bands back in his day, and now is just sort of a producer, produces local stuff.
Yeah.
And me and him hit it off pretty good right off the jump, man. And I, upon stepping into that place, was like, I want to cut a record here. This could be awesome, And within a few weeks, I was in there playing songs. Studio's called Studio One in Regina. Jason produced it. We didn't have really any engineers. It was pretty much just me and him in there. And, with a couple of guests, mostly just me and him playing, trying to play these songs I'd written, some of the first songs I'd ever wrote, And we put it out. He had his own sort of small independent label, and he put it out through there, and I sort of just carried it around with me and started to...
Sold it at gigs, that sort of thing? Yeah.
So
you're putting the record out and you're starting to get...
yeah. At this
out
time,
on the road.
At this time, I'm still working part-time gigs. I worked for an agronomist for a while. They're called Wheatland Agronomy, I'm pretty sure. So I was basically, putting seeds in the ground and helping, just farmhand. And then for a little while, I worked at a radio station in my hometown. I worked there. That was my first part-time job I had. And then I also worked for my cousin out on a ranch just outside of Herbert, Saskatchewan, which isn't far from where I grew up, a town called Swift Current. I worked on a ranch and got to learn how to deal with cattle and keep them from killing themselves every day. So that was sort of a fun gig. But during all that, I was also trying to go out and play shows.
Right.
And sing and figure out how to sing and figure out how to perform and tell stories to folks. And
when did you feel like it was starting to click?
I've always been my own worst critic, which I think is a good thing. So, no matter how good the show is, there's always something that could be better. That's how I kind of am. But I think I really started to develop more confidence in the world of live performing, like a couple of years back, maybe. Just through playing a lot of shows and getting to play for different audiences other than just playing in Western Canada. I got to go out and play for folks over in Eastern Canada and kind of, we went as far as Nova Scotia on my first ever Canadian tour, and getting to play for, different people in different parts of that country was really good for me to figure out how to read a room, I guess. And then also, same thing, going down to the States to play there for the first time. That was a learning curve too,
Sure.
Getting to figure out how to work that sort of thing and how to entertain those sort of crowds down in the Southeast, which is very dramatically different from the Northwest where I'm from.
Right. I mean, does Canada, I've always been under the impression that Canada, the government of Canada supports the arts way more than the United States government supports the arts down here. Am I off base in thinking that?
We have a lot of really great grants that the provincial governments will give out depending on which province you're in. So that'd be like, the state government. They'll give out grants. You can apply for recording grants or touring grants or that sort
Oh,
of
really?
thing.
Touring grants?
Yep, you can, which is a really awesome
Amazing.
thing that you can do in Canada. Where I'm from in Saskatchewan, they have a really great a system, and a lot of friends of mine have it's kind of a grueling process to fill out all this paperwork
Sure.
to apply for it. But if you get it, it's a big help for up and coming musicians.
I think I realized how shitty touring in the States is at a small level after the first time I went to Europe. And I had been touring around the U.S. for years, before that. And touring in the States to me is like you get, and I don't know how much this is relevant now, but when I was like your age and first starting out, you'd be lucky to get like a warm case of Natural Light from the promoter, and maybe there was some shitty dressing room or something. It was like very like you almost treated kind of like a criminal, like how dare you, kind of thing. And then the first time I ever toured Europe, it was like every venue had like a shower, and you could like a lot of them you could spend the night there in some room upstairs, and they'd feed you really well, and they'd give you all the beer you could drink. I don't know, how's it been for you breaking into that U.S. market?
Well, I mean, I can't complain. We've like I said, because I'm so new at this, and because the new record's done pretty all right for us. We've it's been a pretty quick progression of playing those kind of places that you're talking about.
Yeah.
They'll give you a case of beer, and there is no green room. They'll put you in like the back alley kind of thing.
Right,
We've done a few of those,
Yeah.
but we've also been able to play some really, really great spots. But yeah, there certainly is a notable difference, I think, especially between North America and Europe, but also the U.S. and Canada in the way that they treat their touring artists. I don't know if there are any grants that they do in the States. I don't think there are.
Not that I've ever heard of, but I don't know.
And I can't speak to myself. I can't speak to how great the grants are because because of my situation, where my old man's a politician and works for the government. I've never gotten a grant. I've never applied for one because to me that seems like wrong.
There'd be some nepotism involved.
Well, I wouldn't feel right about it, so I've never done that. But I do have friends that have done a lot of grants. Blake and Mel, who I mentioned earlier, some of them, and I kind of wish that some states might adopt. I can see some states on the West Coast doing that actually.
Sure.
Coming out here.
Yeah,
it seems like something they do to support the arts and kind of give up and comers a little bit of a boost out the door.
Yeah.
But
so where in all that did you hook up with Dave Cobb? How did you make that connection?
First gig I ever played in Nashville was at Marathon Music Works, which is a big warehouse building, kind of I think it's pretty much right on the Cumberland River. I'm not sure, but there was a big benefit concert, Nikki Mitchell Foundation, which is this big charity show that a bunch of people were doing, and my manager had sort of snuck me on there on the bill, because I was at the time playing my first ever shows in the States and kind of in the Southeast anyway. So she sort of snuck me on this thing because she had previously worked with my manager Mary had worked with Shooter Jennings in the past, and he was playing it, and she knew a lot of folks that were sort of putting on the show, and got me on there to play a couple songs. So I play this thing, and
So you already had management at this point.
We hadn't. I had just recently met her, and we hadn't really talked about management yet, but she was sort of already doing it.
Right. She was helping you.
We were just friends at that point, but that was sort of the beginning of our relationship, and where she eventually would become full-time manager. But anyhow, I'm playing this gig, and the house band is Jamie Johnson's band, who was sort of the headliner. And I meet this guy. They have to learn the songs I'm going to play. They're the house band, right? And the drummer is a guy named Chris Powell.
Yes.
Who has since become a buddy of mine. Love that dude.
He is great.
Met him. Oh, man. One of the best drummers I've ever been around. But anyhow, I met this guy, and he had made a point of coming up to me. I think I was outside smoking or something, and he said, "Hey, man, I we all had to listen to your tunes to learn them, and I'm a big fan, and I'm good buddies with Dave Cobb. I obviously knew Dave, and I'm sure I was salivating at that point. But he was like, man, I'm gonna, if it's all right with you, you know, I'll email him some of your stuff. And I was like, go for it, fuck yeah, man, go for it, you know, please do. And so I think that was probably the first he had heard of me. And since talking to Dave, I know he had said that somebody else, I think, had sent him, another mutual friend of ours had sent him my stuff. So he was sort of getting it from a few different angles.
Your name was starting to pop up.
Yeah. So he had been made aware of me, and I was obviously aware of him, a big fan of his work. And
did you have a record deal in place with 30 Tigers at that point?
At that point, no, I did not. I wouldn't get a record deal until like about another 7 or 8 months after that.
Okay. Did you go to Nashville and make the record and then shop it around, that kind of thing?
No, we signed the deal pretty much right before cutting the record.
Okay.
So it was sort of, it all happened real fast.
Right.
You know? But 30 Tigers was pretty keen on, you know, getting an LP out, and as was I. You know, I had been wanting to do that for a long time, and I'd had a bunch of songs. And one day, I happened to be in Nashville, and Dave had reached out and said, "Hey man, let's go eat. You know, let's go grab a meal and just talk." And we didn't really talk about working together ever. You know, that was the first time I met him. We sat down at this diner place. I can't remember where it was, but we sat down and ate lunch and kind of just talked about records that we dug. And you know, I brought up a bunch that he had never heard that I was surprised of, and sort of, you know, was like, "Oh man, you got to check these out." And he did the same for me. And we talked about that. You know, we kind of just shot the shit about music and never really talked about working together. And later, I talked to him on the phone and said, "Hey man, you know, I've got to cut a new record and put it out at some point, and I'd love to work with you." And at that point, I think he had been sort of toying with the idea too, and we kind of just said sure. And I sent him over a bunch of recordings I made on my phone of the songs, and just me playing them, and fired them over to him. And next thing we knew, we were over in RCA in Nashville and cutting a record with goddamn Dave Cobb. But
and Chris Powell.
And Chris Powell was there.
I didn't see any bass player credit on your record. Who played bass on there?
The guy that plays in my band, Jason Simpson, who's playing bass. He's a Kentucky guy. He plays bass on the record and is playing bass. He'll be playing bass with me tonight, and for the rest of this tour until I get sick of him. But,
there you go. There's the band leader. There it is.
No,
you're learning.
But he came in and played bass. Laid down some great, real subtle tracks.
Yeah,
really tasty stuff. And
yeah.
We were Dave got Robbie Turner to come in and play pedal steel and dobro on it, and then Mike Webb, who I'd never met before, came and played piano. Blew my fucking mind.
Yeah, he's amazing.
I've never seen him play before. He sits down and did exactly, you know, he only played on one track, but man, it was perfect. It was just what we needed. You know? And then I'm trying to think. I think that's it.
So, like,
for the record, I don't think anybody else played on it.
What would you do? What would you do different next time? Like, I'm wondering what your takeaway from that experience of recording in Nashville for the first time. Like, because I also read that you're already sort of thinking about your next record. So I'm wondering, what would you change next time?
Well, I think, this is, you know, obviously I can't divulge too much, but I'm getting ready to cut a new record pretty soon.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
God, it feels like your record just came out.
I know it does, but I'm chomping.
That's like a 1965 schedule you're keeping. I like it.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to over the course of the next undisclosed period of time. I'm gonna try to take my time and cut a new record.
Do you have the songs ready to go?
I have the songs ready to go. I guess what I took away from that is I've been trying to learn a lot from these producers that I've gotten to know and that I've been working with about really what it is that job entails, because I understand what an engineer does, and I know I could never do it. You know, I just don't have that brain for the programs that they use, and you know how to get certain sounds. That's just not my realm.
Right.
But the producing sort of world thing is something that I take a little bit more interest in. And I've just been trying to, learn little tricks here and there, with the hopes of someday being able to just self-produce, a record myself.
Yeah.
And whether that'll be this next one or whether that'll be, way down the line, I can't say. But,
Right.
That's something that I'm really interested in, and hopefully someday doing is producing my own record, and getting an engineer that obviously knows what they're doing, but just trying to dip my toes into that realm of things, because I've always felt real interested by that whole, what is a producer's job, and
Right.
what does a producer really do? That sort of thing fascinates me as somebody that really loves being in the studio. Which I do. There's nothing like being in the studio. I love it. I know a lot of guys aren't really crazy about it, and they'd rather be on the road. But
I loved working with Cobb. I made a record with Dave
Yeah.
too last year.
He's a sweet guy.
I mean, he's a great hang, but the thing that I loved the most was I'd never really worked with a producer on my side project solo stuff. I was just kind of self-produced it.
Yeah.
And to be able to give your song or songs to somebody who then took control of the situation. Like, I was like almost like a hired gun at that point. It was great. That was the best position to be in. I didn't have to think about anything. Like, I just totally, and it was not in my nature to be like that. And my wife kind of pep talked me before I went, like, why don't you just this time just shut up and listen,
Right.
kind of thing. And I really did that, you know what I mean? And it was fantastic. I look back on it and I just go, God, man, that guy's so in the moment and so intuitive with what he does. That it's pretty amazing. But to have somebody like take that much sort of control and an interest and get into your songs, I think is a really
Certainly is a leap
great
of faith,
collaboration.
But if it's done right, it's kind of beautiful. I can remember having conversations with Jason, the bass player who I was talking about. We'd drive down to Nashville from Bowling Green, Kentucky, which is just right up 65. So we'd drive to Nashville and go in and spend a day in the studio, and then that night drive back up and kind of discuss, whatever. And I can remember talking with Jason about one of the great things about working with Dave was he's such a laid back guy, I think, in his nature that he really puts you at ease. But then certain moments in the studio, he has this spark of like, I guess passion, for lack of a better word. And he'll get really into whatever it is at the moment he's trying to do, whatever sound he's trying to get or whatever thing he's trying to, whether it's overdubs or, whatever kind of tracking we're doing, he would just get this huge burst of energy and become like this madman. Running around in the studio, fixing stuff. And it's really, you'd think it wouldn't work, those two sort of polar opposite traits. But I don't know, maybe it's just the way he is, but it works for him because dude's a wizard, man.
Yeah, he really is.
He just is magic back there behind the glass. And on the other side of it too, that's the other thing I've been saying about the record and why I love it so much is he plays a bunch on it.
Yeah,
Dave can play everything.
Totally.
He's also very much a incredible musician, just as much as he is a great producer. So he plays a bunch of secondary acoustic guitar on the record, had a hand in the arrangement of a lot of those songs. And I'd like to think I learned a lot from just watching him do that.
What's next for you now? Where do you go from here? You're in the middle of your first headline tour.
Yeah, we have been.
Is that stretching out on the horizon as far as you can see?
Kinda. We started, I guess, this headlining tour in. We sort of started right after the whole Americana thing in Nashville. We did a bunch of stuff for the Americana Fest, and then went over to North Carolina and played a bunch of shows over there, co-headlining with my buddy Tyler Childers. I could see his record sitting around.
Oh yeah.
Which was that was a lot of fun. So we did some shows with him in North Carolina and Ohio, and we keep bumping into him. I think he's going to be at Hardly Strictly Bluegrass when we're there too in a few days.
Oh, cool.
But did some shows with him, sort of just sharing the headlining spot, which is a lot of fun. And we got these shows over here out west that we're going to do. Hardly Strictly in San Fran and Portland and Seattle and Vancouver, I think, from what I can remember. And then just a bunch more, man. I think saw that someone posted all the tour dates from now till December the other day. And it's full, man. It's a full slate.
Great.
Which is good,
You're young, you can handle it.
That's right.
That's when you got to do. When you're old like me, you need those big long breaks.
Right.
Because you just ache everywhere.
So we're gonna, over the course of the next few months, just road dog it and get out there. I know we're going back to Europe, I think, in January, February, or sometime in the new year. So we'll be over there after we get done doing this headlining tour in the States and Canada. And somewhere in between there, try to find time to maybe jump in the studio and get to work on a new record. And I've got plans for and just about all the songs. So
all right,
I'm chomping at the bit to do that too.
Well, let's hear one of your old songs.
Sure.
And by old, I mean it came out in May.
Right.
Oh, I know what I wanted to ask you that I totally forgot.
What's that?
Real quick, and I'll slot this in there somewhere. What are your favorite murder ballads? For the listener that doesn't know them, and I'm really, this is for me, but I'm going to pretend it's for the listener. But what are give me 3 of your favorite murder ballads.
Okay. There's a song called Down in the Willow Garden. Bunch of people have done it. It's a folk song, so obviously a lot of different people have done it.
Who's the definitive version?
If I had to pick a definitive version, I might say Everly Brothers. Their version's particularly kind of haunting. Charlie Monroe does a really good version of it too that I like. It's more of a bluegrass version of it. That's one of them. God, there's so many good ones. As far as just sheer kind of graphic brutality, there's a song that the Louvin Brothers did called Knoxville Girl.
Oh yeah, I know.
That is fucking brutal. But that's a good tune too. It's a real good murder ballad. And if I had to choose, I mean, there's a lot of great newer songs that aren't necessarily folk songs that are murder ballads. We were talking about Steve. Steve did that record with Del McCoury Band a while back, and they did the song called Carrie Brown. That's a really great sort of bluegrass murder ballad that sounds like a traditional one, but I'm pretty sure he wrote it with the intention of doing that.
Right.
But man, the list goes on.
Well, that's a great
Willow
starting
Garden.
point.
Willow Garden's probably my favorite.
Okay.
Down in the Willow Garden. That's kind of that one, or maybe Banks of the Ohio. See, now I'm going to go on forever. Doc Watson does a great version of that with Bill Monroe, actually.
Okay.
There's a recording of them singing the Banks of the Ohio together, and it's just, gives me chills. It's great.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's my starting point. Thank you.
No problem, man. So this song is called Codeine Dream, and it's kind of about a lot of different things, but it's mostly, I guess, sort of derived from playing this gig in Chicago at the City Winery, actually, and spending a paycheck from that night whilst in the City Winery at the bar.
Playing on the north wind, lead me to my door, thumbing through my greenbacks, swearing I made more. Some cruel nightly cycle leaves me crying on a motel floor. And I don't cry for you anymore. For many a dark hour I look up to the sky, and many unkind thoughts are laid on my hazy eyes. Sometimes I get to thinking, why wait around to die? And I don't think of you, so I get by. And every day it seems whole damn life's just a codeine dream. And I don't dream of you anymore. The sun's gone away now. The green grass turns to brown. And every December's a little bit harder to lay that bottle down. It's more than just the weather that plagues this prairie town. And I won't be seeing you when I come round. And every day it seems whole damn life's just a codeine dream. And I don't dream of you anymore.
Cool.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, man.
Killed it.
Thanks for having me. That was fun.
Thanks for coming and doing this, man. I appreciate it.
I was saying to Travis on the way up here, man, I don't say yes to a lot of interviews. Not that we have, surplus of people wanting to interview, but they always feel kind of uncomfortable. What's that? I say no to a lot of them. Yeah. they never feel real natural, but when it's like, this sort of podcast.
It was a cold and cruel evening sneaking up on Speedy Creek.
Okay, that was Colter Wall doing an exclusive Walking the Floor acoustic rendition of his hit song, Codeine Dream. Make sure you go to colterwall.com, get all your information about what he's up to. I know he's going to be on tour basically forever, so go out there and buy his tickets and his t-shirts and his CDs and stream it and blah, all that stuff. All right, Colter Wall, what a cool dude. Now listen, friends, I have to appeal to your good nature here. I need a favor. I need you to go onto your Spotify account. I need you to go follow the Walking the Floor playlist. I swear by the time you hear this, I will have updated it with a bunch of new bumping tracks. So get on over there and follow it, man. We need more followers. More. How are we ever going to take over the internet if we don't have more followers? All right. Walking the Floor on Spotify. That is it for this week, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back next week. As always, from the road, this is Chris Shiflett signing off for Walking the Floor. Adios, amigos!
Don't own a damn thing, do you, mate? Well, I got my health, John B. Stetson. Got a bottle full of baby's bluebird wine. And I left my stash somewhere down in Preston, along with 13 silver dollars in my mind.